Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Back to School During COVID-19, Dealing with Uncertainty and Finding Support. My name is Jackie. I use all pronouns, and I'm here with Brianna, as well as a few other friends from our KMH Youth Engagement team today to talk about how we've each been coping with COVID-19. I'm a youth engagement facilitator at KMH. I'm a young person with lived experience, and I bring the youth voice to projects that are about youth. I also support broader youth engagement on these projects too through our through our youth advisory group and National Youth Action Council.
Hello, folks. My name is Brianna. My pronouns are she and her, and I'll be one of the moderators alongside Jackie today for this webinar. I'm the Youth Engagement Assistant at CAMH, and my role includes providing support to the Youth Engagement Initiative team, as well as our youth advisors, both locally and nationally. As Jackie mentioned, today we have a phenomenal panel, and it's made up of youth advisors as well as National Youth Action Council members who will be providing their perspectives around the back-to-school experience during the pandemic.
Before we go any further, we'd like to start with the land acknowledgement, as it's important that we take the time as KMH staff members to acknowledge that KMH is situated on lands that have been occupied by First Nations for millennia, lands rich in civilizations with knowledge of medicine, architecture, technology, and extensive trade routes throughout the Americas. The site of KMH appears in colonial records as the council grounds of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Toronto is now home to a vast diversity of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people who enrich the city. CAMH is committed to reconciliation. We will honor the land through programs and places that reflect and respect its heritage. We will embrace the healing traditions of the ancestors and weave them into our caring practices. And we will also create new relationships and partnerships with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples in order to share the land and protect it for future generations. We would also just love to know where all of you guys are joining us from today. Are you in Toronto or elsewhere in the GTA or beyond? Do you know the traditional territory that you're joining from today? Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and answer some of those questions.
So, as we've stated, today's webinar is focused on back to school, and the topics that we're hoping to discuss today include transitioning to online work, dealing with uncertainty, finding supports and resources, learning about self-advocacy, caring for your community, as well as caring for yourself. We understand that there is a lot of uncertainty right now around school at this time, and so we want to highlight a variety of perspectives through our discussion today, but we do want to flag that this is a smaller group that's participating in this panel, and their experiences may not apply across the diversity of youth experiences. So we're just hoping that their insight will be helpful for people returning to high school, perhaps transitioning to university or college, or even for people who may choose not to go back at this time. As an additional note, some of the topics that we will be discussing today may be more sensitive or might trigger stronger feelings for some people. So if you find you need to step out of the discussion or if you want to take a break, please feel free to do so at any time today. And if you do need more support, please see the resources that we'll be sharing in the comment section to reach out for additional supports. And we're also hoping that this conversation will be fun and interactive. So now that we've had this time to sort of connect and sort of share a bit about the webinar today, let's get to know each other just a little bit more.
But just to get to know everybody for the moment, let's hear from everybody in the chat a few of these questions. So, what is your favorite subject to learn about? What topics are you hoping to hear about today? How did you hear about the webinar? Are there any other topics that you would like to have the youth perspective on in the future? I know that lots of people are joining from Toronto, so hello, fellow Torontonians.
Also, feel free to answer these questions later on. If you don't really have your answers all set, we can always refer back to these questions at any time. So let's talk about the Youth Engagement Initiative for a second. So the Youth Engagement Initiative, also known as YEI, our goal really is to facilitate collaboration between young people who have lived experience of mental health and substance use challenges, alongside clinicians, researchers, and other decision makers at CAMH. In the YEI, young people participate in various ways, from active project partners to providing consultation and advice to guide the work within CAMH. Youth on our team play a really important role in terms of system and service planning, as well as education and also alongside research activities. And collaborating with youth can help to guide program goals and activities to better reflect the needs of youth and create more relevant project outcomes. Our YEI team is currently working from home and staying connected at this time, but there are still incredible virtual opportunities for folks who want to get involved. An example of this is CAMH's National Youth Action Council, also known as NIAC, which currently is an online network with over 130 youth across Canada. Youth on NIAC are able to view available opportunities for collaboration, again, in research, service planning, and education, or just connect with other young people who may want to initiate or even lead their own youth-led initiatives and projects. So if anyone during this webinar is interested in joining NIAC or learning more about the Youth Engagement Initiative, you can always email our team at mccain.youth@camh.ca or niac@camh.ca. So let's take some time right now to talk about mental health and COVID-19. And that's just because more than ever, it's important that we talk about it, as many people are facing additional stress and thus experiencing more challenges as they return to school. Additionally, things are changing every day, and the continued uncertainty can be very overwhelming at this time. For some, it just might be hard to envision how your school year is going to go. You may feel a lack of motivation around getting involved, and it might be difficult to even envision what your future is going to look like right now. And we're here to tell you that that's completely okay. What we're hoping is that our discussion today will serve as a reminder to not only be gentle with yourself and those around you as you move through these challenging times, but also a reminder that you're not alone.
Now we'd like to introduce our panelists from our Youth Engagement Initiative. Thanks everyone for joining us here today. To get started, please share your name, pronouns, and a bit about yourself, including a fun fact.
Hi everyone, my name is Zara. I use she, her pronouns. I am a first-year medical student at the University of Western Ontario. And a fun fact about myself is that I have a cat named Bam Bam.
Hello, everyone. My name's Dan. Pronouns he, him. I'll be starting my master's in counseling psychology online in January. Fun fact, I'm an uncle to 12, and the youngest is 3, and the oldest is 28.
Hello everyone, I'm Hans. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm currently entering my first year in the Life Sciences program at McMaster University. And a fun fact about myself is that I can type at 110 words per minute.
Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm currently finishing up my master's online in counseling psychology. And a fun fact about me is that I'm currently doing a 30-day challenge of cold showers. So wish me luck because it's been hard.
Ani harmonishka kondishnakas, wikwem kon donjaba, adwa nindoji, ginoje dodem, nishna aji nagadaswe dispabonwe. Hi, my name's Harmony Shkak again. I'm from an unceded reserve called Wikwemicon, but I reside here in Ottawa. I'm a guest here on Algonquin territory. My clan is Pike. I'm a part of the Three Fires tribe, and I'm attending school this year for the Indigenous Service Community Worker Program. My fun fact is I'm wearing an orange shirt, and I encourage everyone else to on September 30th to show your support for residential school survivors.
Hey everyone, my name is Don. I'm based here in Hamilton, Ontario, on the territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe. And fun fact about me, I love dancing, breakdancing, bachata, salsa, merengue, hip hop, but I don't dance ballroom or as you can see with the meme, disco. But I'm always up to learning and trying something new. Pronouns are he, him.
Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves.
Awesome. So, without further ado, we're going to get into our discussion now. I'm going to start by asking Dan and Vanessa to answer this intro question. Okay. So, my question is, how has COVID impacted different aspects of your daily life? And I'm going to ask that Dan, you start.
Thanks, Brianna. The two main ways that I found COVID's affected my daily life. One would be work. I do peer support. I can run my own business doing peer support with youth with ADHD. And moving to an online virtual platform has been was challenging at first to keep both myself and the clients engaged. It's a little bit more disconnected when you're working with people. I prefer working in person, and it's easier to build rapport with people. So it's taken some time, but there's a bit of a learning curve, and you get through it. The other main thing was, I guess, with everything coming to a halt, you kind of have time to take a step back and kind of reevaluate what's important in life, what's kind of driving you, and being able to kind of stay connected with people in I guess, a virtual way. And oddly enough, I've actually reconnected or connected with more people now than I did before, because it's you have the time. And if I can't really see anybody or see family because nobody's in the city, I can just start reconnecting with them, and I'm getting closer with some members of my family and talking to old friends, because you kind of see them on Facebook or other social media. So it's kind of like a silver lining in a sense. It's like I've been able to actually connect with more people now because everything's kind of slowed down, and I can see like having, people in your life and, being there for people is probably the best way we can kind of like get through this right now, right? So that's it for me.
Completely agree with you, Dan. Thank you. And Vanessa.
Yeah, I would say something similar to Dan, but the transition of life now for me has definitely been hard, but it's also totally been an opportunity for some perspective changing, and I've enjoyed slowing down in some ways for sure. And that isn't to say that I haven't been upset about things like canceled events, missed concerts, and all those. I'm sure we all have. But for me, my current focus has really been on trying to find ways to adapt a new way of doing things for the things that I previously loved doing in my daily routine. So if that was going to the gym before, now I've been doing some at-home workouts and I've been really enjoying that. But also really focusing on adding some additional time for self-care because that's important now more than ever. And I know we'll be talking about self-care later. But yeah, we need to acknowledge that this has been really hard on our mental health. And I like to think of this time as an opportunity for growth as an individual, but also as a collective society. And there's really no going back to normal to me. I think that will be forever changed. And so I strive to take each day right now as an opportunity to be grateful, especially for our health, but also to be gentle on myself.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for answering that question. And I think you both touched on such amazing points that this is a challenging time and there's so many different things that people will be going through. And that sort of leads into my question that I have for Zara around, this new normal that we're experiencing, right? How would you go about discussing like moving through a lack of motivation when it comes to getting your work done, and perhaps like how you cope with extended screen use now and also like Zoom fatigue? It's a long question, but feel free to answer any part.
Yeah, I like to preface by saying it is a difficult transition. All of my classes are online, and the classes that are not happening synchronously, I have a lot of asynchronous material to do all on the computer. So it is very tough at times with the extended screen times. I get headaches and it's just so annoying. And then when you want to take a break and watch like a film, it's like, no, I don't want to look at the screen anymore. It's like, no, I've lost that sort of coping strategy where you just like relax and watch your favorite film. But now I try to stay away from the screen when I don't have to use it, just so that when I do need to use it, it's not too difficult and I can prevent some of those painful headaches. So there's that. In terms of motivation, I think it really helps to visualize your future and ask yourself, especially if you're in post-secondary education, why you are there, because at the end of the day, nobody's really forcing you to be there. It's optional to attend university. I like to think about the reasons I'm there. So I want to get an education. I want to learn so I can help others in my community, and that helps me get through the modules I have to do, or the synchronous learning that it can be very difficult because I don't have that in-person interaction with my classmates, and I'm missing out on so much, like the social networking that usually goes on at university between classes with your classmates, and then participating in the intramurals and things that really get you up in the morning because you're excited about joining that club, or participating in that after school event. So that's one of my tips for that. Also, when you're online during your classes, if you don't have to and you're not comfortable and you're feeling really, really tired, you can turn your camera off. So don't be afraid of that. Don't feel pressured to do so if you don't have to do it. It's okay to just take a little bit of time off and not having to be on all the time. So you can get comfortable and sit on your bed and watch that video or take that class. Yeah, so just to take some of that pressure off of yourself. And when you're not on the computer, just try to get as much exercise as you can, because sitting for extended periods of time can not be great for your body. And this is coming from more of a medical perspective as well. And finally, I would recommend to connect with the people in your social bubble. So the people you are able to meet in person, try to do that as much as possible. So I try to spend as much time as I can with my family to help reduce that feeling of loneliness.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Zara, for all those helpful tips.
I know from previous conversations with Hans that Hans also has really great study routines and strategies that you had to adapt to online learning. I'm wondering if Hans could speak to some of those things.
Sure. So recently, I've actually tried a technique known as the Pomodoro Technique, where you focus on your work for about 20 minutes, then you take a break for 5, and then you kind of repeat it. And the reason I tried this was because I found that oftentimes when I was studying, I either worked for way too long and was way too stressed, or I just didn't work at all because I knew I would feel overwhelmed. And so over a week with this new technique, it turns out that I actually didn't follow through with it because I found that within 20 minutes, the amount of work that I actually did was very inconsistent or just wasn't enough. So I didn't quite feel like having a break or that I deserved a break. But still, that idea of having that short burst of intense focus and then having a break, it still appealed to me. So instead of having those 20 minutes, I replaced it with an outline of several tasks that I would make. And once I get that done, I could feel justified with having a break. And with the breaks themselves, I tried different types, such as YouTube, Netflix, and even napping. But over time, I found that what worked best for me was that walking outside while listening to music or audiobooks, depending on my stress level, it worked best because it seamlessly added exercise into my routine. And it also allowed me for some time to be outside, especially since I live near a park. And so I felt much more inclined to take those breaks because I felt that even my breaks were in some way productive. Now, certain study routines or strategies work best for different people, and this can be affected by other factors such as mental health, a financial situation, and even other commitments. So I found that it was best to view the entire process of building a routine from a holistic perspective and also to give yourself some flexibility. And over time, so what I sort of did was I observed what study and mental health strategies did work well and which didn't. But not only that, but when I could, I actually reflected on why this did work or why this didn't work. And that provided me an opportunity to brainstorm ways in which I could possibly fill those gaps of what didn't work or reinforce what actually did work. For example, in my Pomodoro technique, I replaced the 20 minutes with the outline of several tasks. And by doing that, I reinforced that sort of short burst of intense focus and breaks. So overall, just practicing, reflecting, and modifying the different areas of your study routine at your own pace is best. And especially because a so-called perfect routine, even if it was possible, it would take a very long time of trial and error, especially during the pandemic's unpredictability. So a lot of new challenges and new obstacles will certainly be there. So it's important to be mindful of that. And, instead of this final routine, I would urge people to consider whether your what I'd like to call routine in progress makes daily life feel more digestible. In that, for example, the schoolwork feel like it dominates your day. It could take up a large portion of your day, but the feeling is what matters. And does your routine in progress make daily life feel more positive? In that, do you feel engaged and excited to do the various tasks that you have to do? And overall, just take it easy on yourself during this whole process. And that's not only a self-care tip, but it's also to avoid burnout. And that's something that I've certainly struggled with for a long time. So for long term, it's important to take it easy. And, even if you do feel stressed, take a break and just reflect later on why you did feel this way. Overall, after some time, by creating a system or an environment special for you where you can feel more confident or safe with your work, I find that we could better handle feelings that come up that can negatively impact our path to accomplishment, especially with things with fear, boredom, and procrastination that can come up. And overall, this will allow us to be better equipped to improve our time management, our impulse control, and I think most importantly, our creativity.
Thank you so much, Hans. Those are all such amazing tips. I'm wondering if maybe we can now kind of flip it and talk about the physical space when you're studying. So, Dan, do you have any tricks for how to organize your study space?
Hi, Jackie. Yeah, like the adjustment period from pre-COVID, where I would always be studying either like at a coffee shop or at the library. Like I usually would not be home. Like I try to separate home life and school life so that I could concentrate better, or just kind of that was the focus of where I was going to be. So it was kind of like an environmental cue. So having to switch to like the only option really being studying and working from home, I kind of had to reorganize my environment to allow me to be able to study, but also to still feel like I can separate it, and I still have time to decompress. And like if I just have my room to work with, like I have to kind of be creative in a sense, right? So organizing and pretty much dedicating like a certain part of my room as like my study area, right? And it's multifunctional because I still have a TV and everything, but you kind of have to like, before I'm going to be doing work, it's like I kind of set it up and organize it so that, okay, this is like study time, right? So kind of like move some things to the side, different distractions. I have like a whiteboard. If money's tight, I also use sticky notes just for like, what do I have to do today? And also some things to kind of keep me grounded, like either quotes or sayings from myself to myself to kind of keep me motivated and also not kind of like overwhelmed, because when there's you can always be doing more things, but trying to be like realistic with your time, right? Like there's only so many hours in a day, so just set aside like, okay, I can do these 3 things and that's enough for today, right? I don't have to. It was the same with hands, where I would burn out because I would just constantly be going and going and going and going. And if there's no real, I don't know, time frame right now with everything, it's easier to keep trying to do things, and then you burn out and procrastinate and then do nothing, right? So I found being able to set up a specific place in my room and call that like my workspace, even though it's literally 2 feet from my bed, but it's still like I've designated it as that, right? So that when I'm done, shut the laptop off, I don't go back there, and I can kind of debrief and go back to, living normal life outside of studying, right? So, and it's going to depend on, someone's living situation, and like, if they have another room to be able to do it in their house, that'd probably be better. So it's not like you can literally have a separate environment for it. And like I use the whiteboard and notes and everything because I find visual cues are a lot more, they resonate, they work a lot better for me. But that just works for me. So for anybody else, it would just be to, try different things and see what works best for you, and then just kind of take it from there. And then, maybe once every 2 weeks, kind of like check back, maybe revise some things, see what worked, see what didn't, and then just keep moving forward, right? That's all we can do right now.
Thanks so much for all that, Dan. I know that another aspect of school that might look a little bit different is co-ops. But before I throw it to Harmony to chat a little bit about that, I'd like to remind our friends following along at home to ask us questions in the chat, because we'll have time for some of everybody else's questions later. So Harmony, have you had any conversations about like how your co-ops are going to look this year, or any thoughts or concerns around hybrid learning?
Yeah, I'll try to answer that by just sharing a story about myself. So I'm returning to school after dropping out of post-secondary 3 years ago due to a lot of reasons, but mainly housing issues. I rushed into post-secondary as soon as I graduated high school because it was expected of me, but there's a lot of pressure on Indigenous students to attend post-secondary and utilize their funding. So I feel more prepared applying to school this time around because I have since gained a community support system and secured stable housing. So I really hope youth realize there's no time limit in learning, and it's okay for students to take time off to look after their mental health, care for family, and not just this year because of COVID-19. When you're speaking about burnout earlier, I was also working 2 jobs before the pandemic, and I don't recommend it because that I was overworked from working retail. And I decided to attend school this year because I want a more fulfilling and maybe one stable career. So for me with COVID-19, I have since been learning more about my culture. As traditional becomes more accessible online, I would say I've learned it more so throughout my whole life because I believe some indigenous communities, they have already been thriving with hybrid learning as we adapted our powwows to social distancing this year. I attended virtual language and beading classes online. I see there's more space for learning on the land or land-based knowledge for those without access to internet. This summer, I also got to assist with Assembly 7 Generations. So it's a local Indigenous youth organization, and they adapted their gatherings online as well, but I got to host like tea and chats. And that was like a webinar for you to connect with elders and knowledge keepers. And a lot of my work was just cold calling knowledge keepers and sometimes teaching elders how to use Zoom. So like depending on your program's requirements, when I'm applying to co-op placements this year, I think it's going to be sort of similar, like taking the initiative to cold email or cold call and prepare my elevator pitch, try and sell myself. I will confirm that due to COVID-19, most people are quick to respond at least. So it's good to start researching early. If you apply to your program, you should have an idea of the type of job or skills for the career you're interested in. But if you're still unsure, you can ask your classmates, educators, or previous students. Don't be afraid to ask questions for more than one person, because they may feel uncertain as so many businesses have reduced staff for social distancing, and some co-ops are highly competitive, but you're going to miss 100% of shots you don't take, and 90% is just showing up or virtually sending emails.
Thank you so much for all that, Harmony. It really puts everything into perspective.
So now we want to get into navigating resources and supports, which can be really difficult if you don't know what is available to you at the various institutions and schools that you go to. And I want to pose this question to Hans and Dan. And I'm going to start with Hans this time. How did you both go about finding mental health supports at school, if you did access them? And do you have any tips that you would want to share for other students who might want to find out what is available to them?
Yeah, so, recently this year I was actually diagnosed with ADHD. And, I went online to read about just some general resources offered by my university. And throughout the week, I did hesitate a lot, but eventually I did reach out by email to the university's disability office to schedule a virtual meeting. And so after exchanging some emails and having some virtual meetings with my program coordinator, who would now become my main contact for anything related to university resources, we kind of discussed my situation in these meetings, what I could be eligible for, and even supports that were already available to me at the time. For example, at our first meeting, she actually set up an appointment for me with an academic advisor to strategize how to best study or do assignments for somebody like me in my specific circumstance. So in terms of accommodations, I actually received extra test and exam times, assignment extensions, and even digital copies of lecture slides or recordings for a post-COVID world, when we do get back on campus. And, even now, the laptop that I'm using to talk in this webinar was actually funded by government grants that my coordinator helped push through. And specifically, it was the CSG PDSC and the BSWD grant, which is generally available for students with temporary or permanent disabilities, including a lot of mental health related ones. But even without my ADHD, I still accessed free therapy, which was offered by my university to any student. And so hundreds of dollars in therapy was saved, and that was a huge barrier for me for accessing therapy. That's certainly a valuable support that I still use to this day. And what that taught me was that there's actually a lot of underused resources and supports that can make our experience of the pandemic, and also just in general our lives, easier for ourselves. And these supports can range from mental health, financial, informational supports from universities, local communities, and even the government. And from my experience, it can certainly feel overwhelming and puzzling on what resources are available for you, just where to start and how to proceed. And it can also feel very personally conflicting as to whether you should actually reach out for these supports. Some of the feelings that I had was that, did I really need it? Did I deserve it? Would it really help? And was going through this whole process worth it at all? And so some of the tips that I would suggest that worked well for me was just to start slowly and to research if there are any people that you could contact, if you're comfortable with, to help you discover what's available, what you can be eligible for, and to overall make the whole process easier, because these people are sort of already in the system, so they kind of know the ins and outs. And for me, that was emailing the academic advisors or even the school disability office. Overall, these things can support your academic and overall well-being. And if you are eligible for a lot of the accommodations, those institutions have actually considered you to be a very good candidate to receive these benefits. And so rather than feeling as if you need it because you're not good enough, which is what I felt in the beginning, it's quite the opposite. You're actually being quite proactive, and finding supports to best support your journey. So that's what I would advise.
Thanks, Hans. I thought about it with like the mental health supports. They don't always have to be directly for or classified for mental health. Like they could just be resources that are assisting you in other areas that you struggle with because of your mental health, right? Like I finished a certificate at Ryerson this past April, and I looked through like financial aid, and I essentially got at least half of the credits covered by bursaries, right? So like the financial aspect of it, that causes stress, and being able to kind of like, I did a little bit of research and found out I was eligible to pretty much go take all these classes for free. Like I get the money, I didn't have to pay them back, right? So there's a lot of different resources. Like I very much agree with Hans that are underutilized, or you don't really even know that they're there, right? Like I went through at least one degree with not even realizing how many different things were being offered for free at the university. It's just, you don't either think they exist, or you don't think you need them, or you don't think you'd be eligible for them. But even just doing a quick search on like your university or college's webpage, and you can find so many different supports, whether it's financial, whether if it's just student support, so like peer support, or like over the phone support, or resources for mental health, or tutors. Like there's a large array of resources that are available. It's just being able to kind of know where to find them, right? So and even a lot of things like workshops, or talking to academic advisors, like if you're unsure of, is this the right degree for me, or like I might want to change things. A lot of things I've found were even just through emails that they send out like once a month, that I used to just always ignore because I'm like, this doesn't really matter. But if you look into it, there's usually workshops being held every week or every month to either like upgrade your resume or interviewing skills. So yeah, there's a lot of different resources. You just have to kind of know like different keywords to search on the school's webpage. So it's usually financial aid, or student support, or accessibility. Those are three big ones I would start with. And you will see what is actually offered at universities and colleges. It's out there. There is support, and I've gone through it too, so I understand how it can be. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Hans, and thank you, Dan. Those are some amazing tips, and you both really hit it home when it comes to understanding that there are a lot of resources that are available to students out there, but one of the largest barriers that students face is not even knowing what is out there, what they're eligible for, and how to apply. And kind of coming from that conversation and sort of shifting that focus, we can talk about the topic of self-advocacy. Like, how do you go about speaking up for yourself and what you might need? And I really want to pose this question to both Dawn and Zara to answer. Like, how did you folks go about learning about self-advocacy? And how or what tips would you give for students who kind of want to make that first step in terms of speaking to a teacher or perhaps a professor about what their needs might look like during this time? And I'm going to ask that Dawn starts.
Thanks. Yeah, in terms of like self-advocacy, I'd even start with just like small steps, like thinking of two things that you need to change, or two resources that you feel you need support with, and finding out from either instructor or teacher or professor whether or not they can support you with this. And especially trying to find out, like, what obstacles or barriers are you facing? Because a lot of times, like, I think university and school and college and it kind of like gets you in this thinking that you have to achieve things by any means necessary, by any, no matter how much sleep you're losing, no matter how much negative emotions you're experiencing, and that's something that for me, I had to start to change, because as much as it was important to meet my goals, whether for school or it was also important for me to realize that, like, the obstacles that I'm facing are real and they're valid, and I didn't need to have like doctor's prescription or a particular diagnosis in order for that to be valid for me, because sometimes that kind of made me doubt myself in terms of like speaking up about things that I was like facing that made school harder. So, for different people, it could be, for me, it was like anxiety, depression, and a few other things that I'll mention. But, for you, just thinking through, like, what are, two obstacles in your way that could be kind of like related to your personal life or external. So you could be a young parent, you could be a caregiver, you could be going through financial difficulty, and maybe racism and mental illness, and there's so much intersectionality there to kind of go through, like, what would really help you achieve your goals, and be able to do that in a way that's like actually going to like help you be a healthier you at the end of it, right? And yeah, I think really for me too, it was like I also felt like, oh, if I'm self-advocating, oh, that might be something that's like selfish, in my own interests. But as I kind of started to do more advocacy, I started realizing how much of an impact it had, not only on me, but on other students, because the more advocacy I did, the more things changed for the better for other students as well. So it's just realizing that self-advocacy is also community care in a lot of ways. And especially if you don't have immediate change, or if those resources are not immediately available to you, that you can start to hear about, like, we've heard so many different stories and so many different experiences here on the webinar about people's experiences, and the more people talk about them, the more of an issue that raises for things to change. And before I go into like some of my own personal obstacles, I just want to, if there's one thing that you can take away before I start rambling, is like, self-affirmation for me was a big thing. So if you can take away one thing, just remember that your experiences, your voice is powerful, you matter, and yeah, speak up for yourself, right? And even if it feels like it's a small thing, bring it up anyway, right? And yeah, your experiences are valid. Yeah, personally for me, I was born and raised in Zimbabwe, and I came to Toronto as a refugee, living in a refugee shelter in grade 9. And it was really hard for me to speak up for myself because of the language barrier, cultural barriers, experiencing racism from the bus driver, going to school, being mocked in front of my class when my grade 9 English teacher introduced me in front of the class, and not getting support around that, and also being set back in my education when I moved to Hamilton with grade 9 university credits from Toronto, and then telling me that like they have to send me back into grade 9 ESL to redo my English because I had an accent. And so there are systemic barriers that people are facing, and the more we speak up about them, the more those things can start to change, and also get support around that from peers, from mental health supports as well. So I just want you to encourage, especially during COVID right now, that if you have health conditions or if you're immunocompromised, I encourage you to speak up about that, and especially that accessing health services and even knowing about your own health conditions can be a barrier too. So even like getting to know more about your health and putting that at the forefront too could be really important as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dawn. And you touched on so many different things. I really wanted to pull out that really important idea of intersectionality and just basically hammer home to folks that it's okay. All of our experiences are completely different. So self-advocacy can be a very large hurdle, and just any small step that you make is important. So Zara, I want to also throw the same question over for you. How did you learn about self-advocacy, and what tips would you give to other students looking to kind of make that first step?
Dawn made some very excellent points. I also want to add that you don't have to have a diagnosis or be experiencing a disorder. Like Dawn said, to self-advocate, we are all humans. We all have ups and downs, and sometimes we need support, and that's everyone needs support at times. So it's not about if you will need to self-advocate, but rather when you will need to self-advocate. So learning that skill can be very important in the long run. I think it's important to realize that self-advocacy is important because nobody knows you better than yourself. Nobody's going to know what you're struggling with, where you need help. So you can't expect other people to come in and kind of baby you or hold your hand and ask you how you're doing or if you need anything, especially in post-secondary. That's not always going to happen. So you need to tell other people what you need without even being asked. I think in terms of academics, a small example of self-advocacy would be if you have a question in class and you want to ask it, but maybe in class you're a bit shy, so you're not sure how to self-advocate. Well, first of all, I would encourage you to ask questions. Your class might have the same question, so if you bring it up, you're actually helping more of your classmates as well. And secondly, if you're in like post-secondary, you're paying for that class. I mean, just ask. Like that's what the professor is there for. It will save you the headache of emailing the professor later or going to office hours. So I would encourage you to push past your comfort zone and ask in class if you're willing to do so. And if you're not, that's okay. You can go to the office hours, the prof's office hours or the TA's office hours, and ask your question. Again, you're paying for this class, so use all the resources. Go to office hours. The more often than not, actually like pretty much 99% of the time, the professor or the TA is going to be really happy to see you, and you're going to look very proactive, that you're being engaged with the content. And asking questions also helps the professor realize which areas were maybe unclear when they were giving the lesson. So maybe next time when they're giving that same lesson, they will adjust their content. And so you're helping future students as well. So that's great. I know it can be a bit intimidating, but just try to push past your comfort zone so that you become more comfortable asking questions. Like Dan mentioned, there's lots of resources out there. One thing I want to highlight is for accessibility services, like if you're registered with them and for disabilities, you don't have to worry that it will affect your career prospects because it's all kept confidential. Additionally, I don't want you to feel that you're being given an advantage over your other students by getting that extra time or getting those extensions. You're not really being given an advantage. In fact, it's just leveling the playing field. Other people don't have the difficulties that you're facing. So by giving you these extra supports, they're actually making sure that you're able to compete with your classmates on an equal level.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Zara, for your tips as well. I'd like to sort of transition our discussion right now. We've done a lot of talking about some of the tips and tools around school and kind of learning to navigate the new normal, but we also really want to touch on the aspects of community care as well as self-care. And I'm going to start with, or I'm going to ask this question, and it's going to be specifically for you, Harmony, around navigating culturally specific resources at school, which can be very difficult if you don't know where they are, how to access them, and if they even are available on campus or at school. And perhaps you can kind of speak to that aspect of school life, and also if they aren't available, looking for them in the community and what that sort of entails.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to say I'm really privileged because my program is culturally appropriate. Indigenous Community Service Worker. It's a one-year program at Willis College. But check to see if your school has a spiritual or Indigenous support center. Like ask an educator if an elder or knowledge keeper comes into smudge. Like I really hope through COVID-19 that spirituality is seen as more essential. Like some community organizations deliver like sage or smudging bundles. Like this is one I got today. So it's really good for your mental health, emotional health, spiritual health. And it's also like kind of helps with the barrier of accessing medicine in the city, right? So there are also still events for students, I believe, to network virtually, like check the school's social media page for live student events. But if you're not comfortable going to school cultural services, then reach out into the community for additional support because it's all about what works best for yourself. Like I've been doing a lot more screen time to connect, but there's also mental health apps and online resources to be more mindful about like your anxiety. I mentioned I attend online language classes to learn my traditional language, but I'm also finishing up like a virtual meditation class, which is like a peer support group because we offer check-ins with each other. Lastly, I also volunteer as a youth water leader, which I do to help try and connect more to the land because that could be hard in an urban area. But you try and find creative ways to be interactive during COVID-19 that kind of like feeds your spirit, I find. Like I practice nature drilling. So it's just been really positive having things to look forward to during the week that isn't just school, but they're also consistent in these times of uncertainty.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Harmony.
I would love to hear a little bit from Vanessa about how to know when to start the conversation with your friends about their mental health and some ways to reach out to them if they are struggling right now.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Jackie. I think that right now, more than ever, it's really important to check in with your friends' mental health. It might sound intimidating or awkward to do at first, but it can really help let them know that you're there for them, and it opens up the space for them to come to you, even if they share with you that they aren't really feeling like they're struggling right now. To me, the best way to open up the conversation to a friend you think might be struggling is to say what you see. It's important when doing this to stick to the facts and not making assumptions. By saying something like, hey, I noticed you haven't been coming to our weekly hikes lately. I just wanted to check in. You come forward in a non-judgmental way, and this just gives them room as your friend for them to take the lead on how they're feeling. And while it might be hard to reach out to friends in person right now, you could always instead send them a text or DM on social media. Those are my two go-tos. And in speaking about reaching out to friends you feel like might be struggling right now, it's important to note some of the signs that you should check in on your friend's mental health. These might include them acting out of character. Maybe they're easily irritable, for example, or they're behaving recklessly or having changes in their behavior that you haven't seen from them before. Or maybe they're mentioning changes like sleep difficulties or that they seem on edge and break down over little things. There are so many things that you can do to be there for somebody and show them that you care. You can share something that made you think of them, let them know that you're free to chat or give them a phone call, tell them that you miss them or wish them a good day. And I think something that's really important right now is acknowledging things haven't been easy and expressing gratitude that you have them in your life. This also might be giving a compliment and acknowledging the good things that they've done and reminding them that they're not alone.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. As a follow-up question to that, I would love to know, how do you help yourself if you plan on supporting a friend?
Yeah, I'm so happy you brought this point up because that's super important too, and equally part of this picture when you're supporting somebody else. So when you're supporting a friend that might express to you that they're struggling with their mental health, while we can be there for them, it's important to connect them to help and separate ourselves and set boundaries from providing advice or support that would be similar to that of a professional. And it can be hard at times to even think of supporting ourselves when our friend is going through such a hard time. But it's important to remember that we can't help others without helping ourselves first. It's like that classic saying, you have to fill up your own cup first. So it's not selfish to practice self-compassion and actually improves our ability to be a supportive friend. Supporting a friend can be emotionally taxing as well. And so attending to our own mental health in the process allows us to show up for our friend in a healthy way. Setting up your own boundaries is also key when supporting a friend. So a quick guide that I like to use for setting boundaries is I'll ask myself if saying no would harm my peace of mind, then, or sorry, if saying yes would harm my peace of mind, then it's not the right thing for me to do. So we won't want to put ourselves in any positions when we're doing something just to make the other person happy. We got to also make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as well. And in doing so, we can't be our friends' only support. Physically, mentally, emotionally, this can be really draining, and we're not capable of this role on our own. And lastly, I want to mention that when supporting your friend, it's important to know what you are comfortable with during this time, especially, and setting clear boundaries around the things that make you uncomfortable or ask too much from you. For example, if your friend asks you to be able to come with them to all of the therapy appointments, but you don't feel comfortable staying in the waiting room, sharing this clearly with them and working collaboratively to find alternatives is really important. So maybe you guys will decide to wait in the car instead while they're in their appointment.
Thanks so much for all that, Vanessa. I have one more question for you, and I think it's really tied to what you were just talking about, but do you have any tips for making friends online?
Yeah, I think I have a few. For me, my favorite way that I found to make friends online is through group engagement. So on Facebook or other social medias. So if you're going back to school right now too, a great way to make friends might be to join groups for your particular class. A lot of the times they'll have, for college or university, you can find a group page on Facebook. Maybe through there, you might be able to find a smaller inner circle of people to work with. And this makes it really easy to find a small study group. And it can be really great for making studying more fun, but also learning from different perspectives on the material that you need to know for the upcoming exam. And although you won't be able to meet up with your study group in person, I think it would be really fun to coordinate maybe some Zoom study sessions and then putting them in your calendar. That way you're all organized and on the same page with that. But outside of classes, being in a club not only brings an element of fun to being in school, but it can also be a great way to build your resume depending on the type of club that you're involved in. So right now, a lot of university and colleges are mobilizing to offer virtual clubs with meeting places taking online. And this means that you don't even have to stay late on campus like you used to. And it's also a really great option for the students who decided not to live on campus this year. Making friends online more than ever should really be prioritized, in my opinion, because it drives us toward connection rather than disconnection. And in a time of physical distancing, having people we can build community with is really essential for our mental health. I know it has been for me. And that this means, in a very direct way, having a strong community of friends can improve our quality of life in this back to school season during this pandemic and beyond. And lastly, even if we can only have our online friends right now and not meet them in person, there are also some positives that I've found to this type of friendship. For one, making friends in a digital world allows us to be potentially connected to people from all over the world with completely different experiences and perspectives that we can learn and shift from. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you so much for all of that, Vanessa.
And now we have one final question that we actually want to pose to all of our panelists today. And it's really about practicing self-care. We want to know what you folks have been doing to pour back into yourselves during this time.
I could go first.
Thank you, Hans.
One way I practice self-care is I often find that I have a difficult time gauging my time. So often I'd find myself long hours working or studying. So what I would do is give myself what I like to call human moments every few hours or so, which means that I video chat or call or message one of my close friends, even just for a few minutes in the middle of my work, just so that I can feel connected to a community, even during the pandemic, and just to have a sense that I have a life outside of work. And since I spend all day in my room, and if possible, I like to schedule socially distant hangouts every week to again make that feeling of being in that community. But it's still okay if I don't do this all the time, and I just do them as needed.
I can share next. Me, sleep is super duper important. If I don't get 8 to 10 hours of sleep, I kind of die. And like throughout the entire day, I'm not able to function at an optimal level. So I found that it's worth the investment to get the sleep that I need so that the next day I'm able to function, I'm able to learn the best way I can and in the most time efficient way possible. And so that I'm not groggy and anxious. So that's been very important for me. And another thing I really like to do is looking at memes. I think laughter is a really great way to de-stress. So I look at memes and I make memes and I share memes. Sometimes people don't laugh because it's not funny, but to me it's funny. So that's what I do.
I could go next. In terms of self-care, I think that the way that we practice it is really individual and depends on what I need in the moment for me. It's important to practice self-care before you reach burnout, as Hans briefly mentioned before. But my favorite way to keep myself accountable for self-care is to schedule it into my calendar and attach it to parts of my daily routine that already exist. And this really makes it easy to do. So by practicing it daily and integrating it into my life in that way becomes natural. For example, I'll do my morning meditation right after I brush my teeth so I don't forget. And other things I love to do right now for self-care, going for hikes, baking, yoga, Pilates, and using my 5-minute journal.
I can go next. It's been saying like self-care is going to be dependent on the person, right? Like what works best for me probably isn't going to work, might not work for somebody else. I agree. Like I listen to a lot of stand-up comedy, going for a walk or just kind of doing chores. just to kind of help get through some of the monotony. My favorite self-care thing though is like listening to a good playlist and going longboarding. Getting some kind of exercise really really helps with my own mental health. And if you if you're in Toronto and you see a guy dancing on a longboard on one leg, like just going around the city, that's me. So that's me doing my self-care there. So yeah, that's how I do my self-care. It's fun.
Amazing, Dan. My self-care is usually cooking and cleaning to a podcast, but I do suffer from depression. So on days that I don't have the energy to do either, I learned that it's better to lower my expectations and try to be kind to myself, which for me could also look like watching 1 hour YouTube collaborations or doing art and trying to create something meaningful. The most recent thing I did was this, and I made this to try and bring awareness to support Mi'kmaq fishers and Algonquin hunters.
It's awesome. Yeah, for self-care, I also try to do some art, but I suck at it. But I just enjoy it and be present in the moment. It helps me just to, yeah, relax. And so, yeah, painting is usually what I do, um, or writing down like poetry, things like that. And yeah, most of all, just like trying to do anything that's like gonna bring me to the present, ground me, and be more mindful. And humor too works too.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your tips, ideas, and experiences during this discussion. And we want to thank everyone today for participating with us, either just tuning in and also commenting in the chat. We've also been monitoring the chat box and we pulled a couple of incoming questions. I'm going to start with this one because it seems like it's coming right at you, Dan. And somebody wants to know, like, how do you hold yourself accountable right now?
How did I know I'd get the first question? So I guess with keeping yourself accountable or like having to do certain things or having goals is like kind of having a reason why. Like if it's kind of an arbitrary thing that you don't attach any meaning to, it's pretty easy to just kind of like shrug it off. So with certain things that like maybe I'm not motivated to do, if I can kind of either attach a reason or know what it's going to lead to, it's easier to kind of help keep me accountable to do the things that I need to get done. And at the same time, I think it's kind of been echoed throughout this webinar is that also knowing like how much am I actually able to do? Like if you schedule in like 15 things in a day and then you kind of like get overwhelmed and then you're just like it's easier just not to do it because it's too much work, then that's not really the best way to be doing it, right? So if I have like 2 or 3 like main things that I know I need to do and then kind of spread it out, so give myself breaks, go for walks, longboard, music, so it's like I have a reward also at the end of the task that I have to do. So it's not just this, oh, I just have to get this done and then this done and then this done, right? So, and it's going to be, for everybody, it's going to be figuring out what's best for you to keep you accountable, right? And it's going to take trial and error, and maybe just don't get discouraged if you try something and it doesn't work, or give it a little bit of time and just see, right? So that would be my take on that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dan.
I would love to know if anybody has any lessons learned that they would like to pass on to younger youth.
I can chime in here. There are a lot of lessons that I'd like to pass on, but one of the most important, I think, is that you should never be afraid to reach out for support when you need it. I know back in the day, I thought that other people were busy and I didn't want to bother anyone with my problems. And sometimes I did reach out, but the problem came back or it wasn't resolved, and I didn't want to reach out again because it just seemed like I was draining resources around me, such as going to a counselor. I thought other youth needed it more than I did, but I've realized that I needed those resources and I should use them. The resources are created for youth like me and you to use so that we can get better and so that we can fulfill our dreams. And I'm really happy that I reached out to the support when I did, because it really helped me to become a more confident person and help give back to the community. It helped me finish my undergraduate degree and get into medical school. I don't think I would have made those accomplishments if I didn't have that support. And now I'm I'm better. I'm able to give back to the community and help support other youth and encourage them to get help when they need it.
Thank you so much, Zara. That's a really awesome info to pass on to younger youth. I have another question quickly that came from our friends following along at home. It's, how do you manage difficulties staying focused while working at home, especially for those of us who previously focus better on campus or at a coffee shop?
So I can answer a bit of that. So, I definitely hear you. Before, I was relying on libraries to do a lot of my studying. And I found that while working at home, you kind of have to reflect again and think why that you focus so well in a coffee shop. And I'd say try to put the coffee shop in your home. So what I'd like to do is I'd section off a time of my day, which would usually be the mornings, and I'd sort of get coffee and put it on my desk and just get some snacks to fuel myself up for a long study session. And even on my headphones, I would play a cafe ambience, just to sort of immerse myself in that environment. And some of the other things that I've also tried is moving to different parts of my home to try to find a location that would give me that feeling. And also, I think it's important that if you are doing this and trying to create an environment in which you can focus, it's also important to keep in mind, try to not to force it too much, because after all, once you enter a coffee shop, you're just in the coffee shop. You don't really think about it, and then you're in the zone. So just be considerate of that and reflect on what your needs are, and just bring the coffee shop to your room. Yeah.
Thanks so much for that, Hans.
So we're going to save the rest of the questions that are coming in through the chat till the end of the webinar, but we do want to start by sharing some of the resources that we know of with all of you, just in case you feel like you may need additional support. So for everyone following along right now, feel free to screenshot the following slides that we put up for awesome resources. So if you feel like you need support right now, you can reach out to Youth Wellness Hubs Ontario, Children's Mental Health Ontario, Canadian Mental Health Association, or you can connect with Connects Ontario for free and confidential support, navigation and information services, and all of the available sites are there, so feel free to screenshot this slide. Going in a little bit more about Youth Wellness Hubs Ontario, they currently have 10 sites across the province and are offering free virtual and phone supports to youth between the ages of 12 to 25. And some of their services include mental health supports, substance use supports, housing, employment, and so much more. And you can get connected with the Youth Wellness Hubs team either through their email, which is info@youthhubs.ca, or you can visit their website at youthhubs.ca. And if you feel like you need immediate support right now, you can always call or text Kids Help Phone or Good to Talk. And Good to Talk is specifically a service for students right now. You can also If you're also interested in community-specific resources, you can call the First Nations and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline, and you can also get in contact through phone or text message with the Trevor Project, which is a resource for LGBTQ+ youth. So feel free to screenshot this slide as well. And as mentioned during our panel discussion today, there are various supports and services that may be available to you at school. And we sort of compiled a list of search terms to help you find the resources you may need. You can search for these through a general search engine, or you can try to look through them at your school's website. So some of the terms that we have here are OSAP Disability Grant, Career Center, peer support, financial bursaries. And again, feel free to screenshot this slide as well, folks.
I'm also going to flag, if you didn't have a chance to screenshot those resources, they were also posted in the chat too, if you want to grab them from there as well. So our team has also created many by youth for youth resources that you can check out online. You can visit our Game Changers page for more information, or KMH also has a COVID-19 information page on the site too. And here's an example of our Coping with COVID-19 tip sheet. We also have this awesome ABCs of COVID graphic that shares different things that you can do to support yourself during COVID or in general. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Harmony, who made this graphic and drew all these awesome images too. We'd also like to remind you folks to email us if you're interested in joining our youth engagement team. We're always looking for new members to get involved on our team and to support different activities around youth mental health.
And we'd like to say a big thank you to all of our amazing panelists today for providing their feedback and expertise on this topic, and as well as a big thank you for all of you for tuning in, participating, and chatting with us today. We really hope that this information has been helpful, and we'll also be staying on for an additional 10 to 15 minutes to answer some of the questions that you folks have posed to us. But if anyone has to go right now, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have an amazing evening.
I'll quickly just ask another question from the chat. So what is something we've learned from the pandemic? What do you want to keep moving forward, and what's something we want to not fall back into once things return to normal? It's a really good question.
I could say a little bit about that too. I mean, for me, what I've certainly learned from this pandemic is the importance of our routine, and also of sort of other people even. You know, it's just, once things have been disrupted, the places that we usually like to go to study, like the cafes or the libraries, once that's all been sort of taken away from us, we're kind of forced to adapt, and just starting to sort of readapt to everything has certainly been a challenge. And not only as we're struggling with that, but how we interact with people, how we communicate with our friends, even that has taken a huge hit, and the way that we are doing that is dramatically changing in so many different ways. And also the increased use of online media and all these different things. So certainly, you know, COVID has been a very interesting time, so to speak. And I think that it just highlights the importance of these things in our lives and for our mental health.
Thank you so much, Hans.
I can also add something to this question. I think a lot of good has come out of the pandemic. It has forced institutions to restructure the way they host meetings and have these mandatory sessions so that they're more accessible to people in their workspace or in their institutional setting. And there has been a lot of meetings that I personally have attended that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise because it's difficult to travel sometimes. So definitely there has been some great things that came out of the pandemic. I think it has also shown us how resilient we are to be able to transition in such a profound way in such a short period of time. So that's a great thing to remember about yourself too, that you were able to transition. So you have that capability inside of you. And I encourage you to remember that whenever you're faced with an obstacle in the future.
Thanks so much for adding all that, Zara.
Yeah, just quickly for myself too, like similar to a lot of people, like lockdown brought on a lot of time on our hands. And so made people like, try different things. And sometimes it's harder to do when you're always busy. So kind of helped us to do more like self-care. And sometimes, the self-care that we always go to might work last week, but might not work this week. So that kind of makes us want to change things up a little bit and like, find out from our friends about like what they do for self-care and even like doing like what does collective care look like and doing that together and even trying to do stuff virtually as well was pretty cool too. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Does anybody else want to add into that question? I know we have a few more from the chat. I don't want to cut anyone off. Okay, I think we're good. So our next question, is there anything that you guys are looking forward to?
I could speak a little bit about this one. I mean, for sure, there's a lot of things that we're all thinking right now, like seeing family and friends without fear of being too close to them. But I think in relation to what we're discussing today, something that I'm really looking forward to is hopefully continuing speaking about mental health in the way that we have. I've noticed that like almost right away, we were all so focused on what this lockdown could do to our mental health, and the government really stepped in and talked about it. There was some really awesome call out to Kids Help Phone, which got a lot of new crisis responders and got a lot of people getting the support that they needed. But yeah, just the overall willingness to really speak about our mental health and talk about it with each other, but also get the professional support. So I hope that that continues.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Does anyone else want to answer that question as well?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thanks, Dan.
Things to look forward to, reconnecting and building more bonds with members of my family and old friends that I've kind of reached out to. I'm still going to be starting a master's degree in January. So like there are things I guess you can kind of still work towards. Like some parts of our life might be kind of grinding to a halt or kind of pushed back a little bit, but there's still other areas that you can kind of focus on or like look forward to. And the new episode of The Boys that's going to be on Amazon Prime Friday. So that's the other thing I'm looking forward to.
Thank you, Dan. And we have one final question that's come through, and it is, what is something that we don't want to fall back into once things, quote unquote, return to normal? And I'll give everyone some time to kind of think. Dan, go ahead.
Not allowing yourself to have self-care time, right? Like it's really easy when I got school, I got work, I got all these other responsibilities. It's like I got to go, and it's not taking the time to realize that it's okay. You can have the day to be like, I don't need to do anything today. I need to take care of myself, or to give yourself time each day, like allowing yourself to take a breath, take a break. I heard this same thing that Vanessa said, but it's in a different way, where it's you can't pour from an empty cup. It's pretty much the same thing, right? So allowing yourself to have that time, the self-care time, because you need it, and you'll probably be better and more productive if you have it and you take the breaks, right? Everybody needs that time, and like implementing that in a daily schedule, I think, is something that everybody should be doing moving forward.
Thank you, Dan. And we have time for one more person to answer that question if they would like to. Otherwise, folks, we are getting close to the end of this webinar time. So again, I'd like to take the time to thank all of you for tuning in. Everyone who has submitted questions, has engaged with us either through Facebook or YouTube. It's greatly appreciated, and we really are hoping that you have taken something away from this conversation. And we hope to have similar discussions, conversations, and things of this nature in the future. All of our work is youth-focused and youth-centered, so just being able to have this platform to engage with you today has been amazing. And again, a special shout out to all of our youth panelists for providing their expertise as always. It was phenomenal speaking to you, and enjoy the rest of your Mondays.